Okay, let's open it to the audience. Yes.
I'm myopic. You will distribute. You will give voice. Yes.
Well, I want to ask you a question about the way you relate, Badiou and Hegel in your corpus.
He is the authority. Seriously, he wrote a wonderful text reading Badiou as Hegelian against his own. Sorry, go on.
In your interpretation, the Hegelian absolute is this non-evolutionary process of failed attempts at total self-identification. These attempts, whether we call them notions in the Hegelian sense or fantasies in the Lacanian sense, are self-relating paradigms or frameworks.
What do you mean exactly?
But now if we agree that Badiou's name for the absolute is event, then the question is, there is no substantial relation or dialectics between events, as plural events, in Badiou's thought. And that's precisely why Badiou can ignore political economy or even class struggle in his philosophy and in his politics.
This is an interesting point. Can you develop it minimally? I don't get it, but I would like to believe you. I don't get it. Why? Because there is no relation between events, but you cannot get political economy.
Yes, because then class struggle, you have to develop it, in a sequence. When there are no relations with events at all, with plural events, then you can't really, you can ignore, this developing some sort of political economy or theory of class struggle and still be some sort of communist. But my problem is that can you, as a Hegelian Marxist, like Badiou, talk about absolute as subject, but not as substance? Because maybe in your case, the Hegelian formula must be reversed, in a way, maybe we should say that absolute is not only a subject, but also a substance.
Do you know who already proposed this reversal? No. But I tend not to agree with him, Gadamer. In his Wahrheit und Methode, he says that the task of hermeneutics is to turn around Hegel, to see subject as grounded in a substantial hermeneutic horizon, and so on and so on. But, maybe, okay, again, another nice question. To answer it means another 3 hours talk. Just this, that maybe the key is, again, in what do we mean by the term absolute. Absolute for me is just, absolute means a certain structure of self-referentiality, and it's not absolute in any stupid sense of, absolute. Absolute is something that changes, that can disappear, whatever. But I would maybe put it in this way, to give you a formula.
When you talk about this constant process of subjectivation, for instance, in Lacan, there is, it's true, it's not, but there is...
This is a very tricky question, because I think that you are obviously half, at least, a Lacanian. Then you must know, do you know a wonderful book by François Balmès, Ce que Lacan, is it Lacan or Heidegger? Ce que Lacan did the letter, on the relationship between Heidegger and Lacan, where he draws attention to how the term subjectivization is more of the early Lacan, where subjectivization means subjective through symbolic appropriation, but the true enigma is late Lacan's notion of subject, where, surprisingly, in his, I think, Logique du Fantasme and so on, Lacan violently, in a good sense, returns to Cartesian cogito, in an explicit move against Heidegger. Why that? So again, it all depends, what do we mean by subject? In this sense, I'm tempted to remain Hegelian, because substance is for me the full consistent other. And the point is not to subjectify substance in the sense of some absolute subject reappropriate substance, but in the sense that the gap that separates the subject from substance is conceived as internal to substance itself. In this sense, formal, materialist, I consider myself a Christian. In the sense that what happens in Christianity? You feel abandoned by God. The Christian solution is not, pray a lot, squeeze your balls, torture yourself, and God will take you back to Him. But think about the moment of crucifixion. exactly God himself was at the same position of abandonment than you are. So Christian solution is precisely when you feel radically abandoned by God. This separation from God is immanent to God himself. That was Christ on the cross and so on. In this sense, I am for subjectivity. It has nothing to do with this. Maybe this is what Balmes hints why Lacan keeps the term subject. Maybe, and Hegel knew this, when we talk about subject, we are too much part of this, maybe even pseudo-Fichtean Marxism, where subjectivity means, creativity, productivity, domination. For Lacan, subject is at its most fundamental a passive position, a position even of an impotent observer. The fundamental attitude of subject is not an agent. You become a subject through experiencing failure.
Yes, but what I meant was that there is a relation between these attempts, these notions in Hegel. There is some sort of
you touch a big problem.
Events have you don't have like a sequence of plural events. You just have singular events. I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but...
No. This is a key problem. Maybe we should ask the master here, because just to introduce you, and as an amusing element, I once, when Badiou talks about love, I once asked him a typical male chauvinist question. Okay, but can I have at the same time...
How come you did that? That's amazing.
No, I mean, can I have multiple, I have an event with that woman in another city, I have an event with that. And he said, yes, why not, typically. He even said at some point, but I'm doing that. Let's not go into that. We need you here to intervene, comrade.
Maybe just, as everything for Badiou, an event is, as soon as it becomes an event through the consequences, a multiplicity. So every event, this is why in Being Event says, every event is the in-between of two events. Every event is internally multiple. So
internally multiple.
Yes,
you don't have plural, events.
But what do you mean by... this is why every event is universal and immanently related to other events.
How? For example, relate in an immanent way French Revolution to October Revolution. Is this part of the same historical... What?
No, she's completely correct in pointing out that he basically thinks they're, let's put it like that, singular aisles of history.
Yeah.
With, worlds fully separated, fully ruled by different transcendental. But what is common to them is the very rupture that the event introduces, like the clash within each mundane civilization. This is what unites them. Like the instantiation of an exception that then introduces consequences. This very moment of rupture is what relates them.
Okay. And they are effervescent, as he says. They disappear. So to that extent...
Yeah, but
sorry, we're not discussing Badiou today, we're discussing Zizek. So Badiou will be here in a few months.
Badiou is part of me in a holistic
yes, unfortunately, okay. You can come and ask Badiou himself. So a few more people were interested. But he's not Zizek's Badiou's agent, he's Zizek. Okay, so...
No, I like to be Badiou's agent. In this sense, I can sell stuff. I can hurt
in
him
the sense in the sense of secret agent, you mean?
Sorry?
Secret agent.
No, I'm not secret agent, I'm a public agent. Secret enemy, I prefer that.
Okay, the gentleman.
Please.
Yeah. First of all, I agree with the critique of post-colonial theory that you offer, and regarding the more effective universalism that Indians are creating. But the more effective universalism you talk about is of the so-called subalterns, which are Brahmin elites of India. But you are assuming India as a singular entity.
That's possible.
And history of this singular entity is less than 65 years. Before that, it is more than 1600 languages and many cultures and many religions, much more variety than Europe, which is a continent.
Yeah.
And they don't consider it to be a subcontinent. It's a nation state, which doesn't make any sense. Now, I understand all that, and I understand politics behind it, and I agree with you on Ambedkar and everything. And we are also, like, I'm a second, we're fighting against India, and quite a lot of bloodshed we have been through. But I have a language, and that language has potential to offer some kind of cultural and political space, which we have successfully constructed in the past. Like 1710, in the first Sikh ruler in Punjab, we were the first one in that region at least to snatch the land from the landlords and distribute in the cultivators. And regardless of the religion, Muslim cultivators, Sikh cultivators, everybody. So if I have to translate my language in Hegelian terms or in any other terms, when I do not even relate with the Christian theme of death of God, which in my understanding plays quite crucial role in the Hegelian dialectics, and throughout, it never goes away, right? The whole Nihil. Why do I have to go through that? Like, I don't mind what you do in Slovenia or what the Germans do in Germany. My question is, if the other languages have the potential to construct their own spaces, and potentially they might be able to offer a different, which I don't call to be a discursive space, maybe something non-discursive, a different space, a different model. Can the West ever allow that space, or the wound has to be cured through their sphere? That's my question.
It's a very good question. I just made a very specific point, which is that but this is not a point that can be applied mechanically all around. Like, I'm not saying, for example, today to the Chinese, learn English or whatever, and you will. Of course, all I'm saying is how. For example, I don't know about your specific situation, but what interests me is, that was the crucial moment of how, what you fight when you fight colonization is usually an immanent reaction to colonization, not in the sense that you become subservient to it, whatever. But for example, again, I just ask you this, again, I repeat this naive point that I made. The India, I'm not even saying I necessarily like it, but the dream of the new India that they are striving for today, can you, it's for me, okay, I'll put it like this. What surprises me again and again is how true brutal economic imperialism always needs authentic local cultures. That's why I don't like this standard. My enemy was this attitude of there is bad pseudo-universal imperialism and we can resist it through sticking to our particular roots and so on. Maybe I'm especially sensitive to this coming from Europe, because, for example, in France, you have the so-called Grèce movement, Alain de Benoit and so on, who are precisely saying this. They say, we have nothing against multiculturalism, we just want for the French the same rights to keep our culture, and so on, and so on, and so on. What I want just to do is something very basic, is to see when you experience something as a trauma dislocating you, to see a chance of liberation in what appears as a trauma. So, in order to answer you, and then I will stop fully, I don't know enough about your Punjab society. It would have been, but when you say you got rid of the law of the masters' land, and who were the masters? What was the inner tension of your society? I don't know enough about that, you see.
It was we were not ruling the land, Mughals were ruling, 1710.
Muslims were ruling.
It was old feudal culture where one master owns like 10,000 acres
Yeah.
and cultivators work for them. When we started ruling in 1710, we snatched the land from all the feudal lords and distributed among the cultivators.
And what happened then?
But let's not go into the
No, but
details
this
of Indian history now.
What happened then? We were
Briefly.
defeated again, and things came to the same place.
You mean new masters took over? No, or
No. The Sikh rule ended in a few years.
Okay.
And the Muslims started ruling again. Again we started ruling.
Yeah.
Again we constructed that system.
Yeah.
In
But I
which
mean,
there is no feudal lord. My point was, between 1978 and 1992, India killed more than 150,000 of our people. We are fighting against India.
yeah. Okay.
When you mention India, I automatically become part of that so-called effective universalism that I have no reason to endorse to. My point is, my language, for me, defines a cultural and political space. How do I realize that?
no, I will give you a very short answer. Now I got it. This is the point. I don't fully agree with, she simplifies it very much with Susan Buck-Morse, Hegel and Haiti. But she says very nicely how within a nation, those different religious blah blah minorities, they are the site of universalism. I think that even if you experienced yourself fighting the Muslims, you were not simply more particular. By insisting on your particular identity, getting the land, you were de facto the site of universality there.
Yeah, and that is, I think, your correct position, and I was a bit, sort of surprised that you didn't give it earlier. First, the language and the culture can claim the position of the universal.
Yeah.
Second, in a particular situation like that, but all over the world, these are also the part of no part. So in that sense, as a part of no part, can claim again the position of the universal. So I think that in a sense, the last part of your talk, which did not link very well with the earlier, sort of has that problem that in a sense, you kind of claim that the English language or that kind of universalism is the only universalism that exists, and to that extent can be co-opted to the Hegelian position. But it's absolutely not true. I mean, that's what the gentleman said.
No, nonetheless, wait a minute. The problem is that today with global capitalism, English language has a certain role. But another thing I want to make to confirm your point. For example, for me, one of the greatest historical tragedies, and I'm not saying this because of that bullshit movie with Robert De Niro, Missions or whatever. I'm talking about the Jesuit Republic of Paraguay. Can you imagine what would have happened if Jesuits were to be allowed to rule in Paraguay? A wonderful thing. Do you know that already when they were ruling Paraguay, they were already establishing, how is it called, Garano or what? I don't want to appear racist. Okay, the local language, all terms that I use are racist, but let's call it the native language. They were already printing books in them. That's my reproach to Chavez when he says, gave the book to Obama, blah, blah, blah. But fuck it, who is Chavez? He's Spanish. He's speaking Spanish. The true heroes the true universalists were Jesuits, even if there were elements of religious terror, but they were building Indians, aborigines as a nation, printing their books and so on. And this is one of the most terrifying crimes, where, the same as you said, when united Portugal from the north and Spain, Argentina from the south, Brazil, without any reason at all, they attacked, massacring them all. Paraguay, because precisely Paraguay would have been something like your Punjab succeeding, their own language, their own culture, and so on. So I totally agree here. Yes, that was the site of universality.
Okay. I think the gentleman there, another Slovenian. Come on, Alan. Yes. Thank you.
I just want to go back to the question of nature. You were saying that nature gets its meaning only through our being here, our presence on Earth, yeah? So nature or deonti doesn't have any meaning without our presence. Only through language does it gain meaning. So, and then I got an association. I was watching a documentary on Deleuze, Abecedère, where he talks about how he's revolted of the human relationship with animals, and that the only relationship with animals that he praises is the animal relationship with animals. So if you can relate to that, I mean, my question is, how can we build like an ecological consciousness or sensitivity toward the ontic, toward the animal, the non-human being in nature? Or do we just, I don't know, enjoy our lives and go on with our capitalist ways of relations and lifestyle and destroy it? I mean, nature is only here for us to enjoy it. Because without us, it doesn't have any meaning anyway.
There are many paradoxes in what you are saying. Okay, again, my God, it's half an hour answer at least. What I would say is that the main trap to be avoided is to be anthropocentric in the very self-debasement. For example, what I see as the obvious paradox of so-called deep ecology is, you know how they like to say, not only animals, even trees, even habitats have their rights. Yes, but fuck it, they cannot talk about that. We humans are nonetheless presupposed as the only agent of universal rights of all others. This is a nice example of how, even if so-called deep ecologists like to empirically, ontically humiliate humanity, we are just a subspecies here, other, again, not only animals, but trees, valleys, rocky mountains have their habitat rights. But nonetheless, the only side of these rights are we humans, or a counter-argument. If we just brutally exploit nature and so on, well, in some sense, animals are doing this. Let's not idealize nature. Nature itself is full of catastrophes where one species overexploited the habitat, screwed it up, ruined everything, and so on and so on. So again, my first condition of authentic, radical ecology would have been to attack not only the usual suspects, you know, technological imperialism, we are exploiting nature and so on, but especially this false self-denigration and so on, which still fully asserts like human arrogance. For example, of course, up to a point, I agree even with Peter Singer's position, although if I ever saw, you know, evil gays, like gays which can kill you, is when I gave a talk at Princeton and I just grabbed a chicken sandwich. And then Peter Singer observed me like, how can I do that? Evil gays killing. I buy that, but what I'm saying is just there is a great danger of extremely arrogant anthropocentric projection there. For example, Daniel Dennett, who is not a complete idiot, he often simplifies things, but he gives interesting examples. Daniel Dennett mentioned somewhere that in a documentary, or I don't know where, I think it's in his Freedom Evolves book, I'm not sure, how he saw two apes fighting, and one ape tearing off, two males fighting for a woman, a testicle from another ape. And he said, obviously, there was a terrible cry of pain, the animal was suffering terribly. But then he says, 10 minutes later, the same animal was what it looked like, gladly, joyfully jumping around. So fuck it, maybe it wasn't this. You know what I mean? It's very open and uncertain. While, of course, we shouldn't be Cartesians and claim that when animal seems to cry, it's just some mechanical sounds. It's really an open enigma. And this is how I also read Derrida. Derrida is not the animal that I am. It's not a simple New Age, you know, and then you end up with this, you end up like Prince Charles, who I heard he's also talking to the trees and so on, no?
Hugging the trees.
Sorry?
Hugging the trees.
Yeah, hugging even. I hope not going a step further and like, okay, whatever, no? No, but you see what I mean? I think here I agree with Badiou, who said that ecology, precisely because it is a real problem, it's also a terrifying, crucial site of struggle. For me, ideological struggles are almost focused in ecology today.
Okay, let me take three questions perhaps together and then have
But there are 4 hands. Who is liquidated?
We'll take 4. It does okay. Okay, the gentleman.
My first question is piggybacks on the previous one, and I agree with the critique of deep ecology, but nonetheless, you were going to talk about the limits of Hegel. Can Hegel think the Anthropocene? So the last week, as some of you might know, the CO2 has reached 400 parts per million, so that's as high, whatever, that's 650,000 years. So I say that again, 650,000 years. So the development of spirit, as you said, it's self-referential, but if we're going to have a communist eschatology, does it make sense to think the Anthropocene as what precisely triggers universalization? So universalization, is that just a vector within the realm of ideas, or is there not a trigger happening at the moment from, I don't like the word, but nature?
I see.
That's just a question.
Okay, so my question is to do with language. It's to do with the English language, which went to India and worked in India and returned from India. And on its return, it brought features from the Indian form of life, such as the tag question at the end, which forms the end of a sentence like "in it," which causes horror to people like Peter Hitchens and Nigel Farage and so on. And so now they have this experience, it's very dialectical, where they say, oh, we're being colonized by this returning experience. So my question is, how can Nigel Farage take that experience and become Nigel X?
Okay, an excellent idea. Yes.
I sort of have the flip side of that question, which is I agree with you that it's completely philosophically sound about finding the universal between different forms of sort of oppression, or however you want to put it, the particular of the particular. But what I wonder is, what happens next? I mean, I think the crucial question is, I think cricket is a really good example to think about this, actually, because you have this game that the British brought to India and to the Commonwealth, and now the Commonwealth has totally kicked, the ass of the English. But yet it's the site of India-Pakistan nationalism. It's how these two different groups are fighting each other. So what do we do next when the two groups, the particular of the particular, fight with each other? I mean, what's the next step?
Okay, let us stop here for the first 3, and then we'll take another round.
I will try to be as short as possible. First, First, Anthropocene. Of course, Hegel, the way he wrote it, wasn't able to deal with it. It's even clear, as Fred Jameson noted, that, for example, although Hegel wrote a lot reading Adam Smith about capitalism and so on, but his notion of capitalism is still a pre-modern one, a little bit of division of labor. Hegel didn't yet have the concept of a modern factory and so on. And the irony here is not that this is something that kind of eludes Hegel, but that Hegel didn't see the very radically Hegelian dimension of what was emerging. And the greatness of Marx is that he discovered that modern capitalism is much more Hegelian than even Hegel thought. And in the same sense, I don't see a big problem with Anthropocene. How is the guy called who developed the idea? No, but the one who wrote the book on...
Yeah. Some geologist.
Yeah, no. What I mean is that you see, it's too. How do we read the idea of Anthropocene? It's not enough just to say thereby we are forced to take awareness of ourselves as one of the species on Earth. Because precisely with Anthropocene, we become the universal species. And not only in the philosophical sense that we have access to conceptual universality, but in the quite literal sense that we become directly a geological factor and so on and so on. So again, the only thing I would say is that a Hegelian approach here would be maybe the most effective tool against different New Age temptations and so on that dwell here. As to because all I can tell you is that in which shitty book of mine, I think it's Living in the End Times, I did try to deal with precisely Anthropocene. I think it's one of those cases where Hegel is literally needed to clarify the situation. What you said about languages, it's a wonderful point. The only thing I can add is that this particular of a particular, you know where I see true universality of languages? Not in some Esperanto stupidities or English as universal language, but when one language uses words which are used as borrowed from a foreign language, but really nobody uses them in this sense in that other language, you know. Like, so that as if modern French invented its own sub-English. From cinema theory, I know. What in English you call a tracking shot. In France, they call traveling. But no one in English uses, you know, it's as if they invented their own. And these are maybe this particular of particular, you know, where the French imagine their own English. The universalization for me would have been for the English to adopt this double falsification as their own, as it were. And the philosophical example I usually give is that Derrida was, in a way, intelligent, radical enough to do this. It's clear that the American reading of Derrida was a misreading up to a point, simplified. But then at a certain point, Derrida, knowing that this was a misreading, started almost, it's not quite, to imitate his American imitators. That's all his political, ethical, religious turn. And look what wonderful results we got, I mean. Or again, to go back to cinema theory. You know, film noir. It's clear that it's a pseudo-notion. Stupid French didn't know what happens in Hollywood. They invented a term, which totally misrepresented Hollywood. But look what then happened. Hollywood itself took over this term and produced some good movies imitating a false image. And this is the big lesson of Hegel that I didn't have time to develop. What Hegel praises, not only synthesis in the sense of this is one-sided, that is one-sided. What Hegel knows is that the greatness of spirit is the power of abstraction. Everyone can say, oh, I'm a multiple person, I have this, I have that. But then the art of language is to say, no, this is the main feature. It's a symbolic, you know, the power of simplification, which is why I advise you to read a wonderful book, Alexander Luria, Memoirs of a Mnemonist, or what. It's a nice case from Stalinism, nothing to do with Stalinism, of a guy who had perfect memory. Like he could remember, and the problem was because of this he was practically unable to think. Because being unable to forget, he was not able to think, you know, he knew too much, so it's a beautiful Hegelian paradox. He had to develop special techniques, not like medieval scholastic to remember, but to forget, you know. He had to elaborate a complex mechanism not to remember it all, to be able to approach thinking, and it's typical. Luria is an intelligent guy. He had sympathy for psychoanalysis. He develops the entire subjective attitude from this illness. How, because of this remembering too much, this guy was not able to do a performative act in the sense of now I decide this. He was in a permanent state of awaiting for some big event. It was never possible for the event to happen. Sorry, the last one was cricket. Yes, cricket is a wonderful example, and I like precisely your pessimist conclusion. Yes, I agree. It's not that then we will have a paradise. Then the real fight begins, you know. Although I must say that there is something even more ironic in cricket. It's so beautiful that cricket emerged as the universal post-British Empire legacy. And it's universal. I remember before he got crazy, 15, 20 years ago, Robert Mugabe was asked, what is for you the most precious legacy of British colonization? He said cricket, of course. But what I like about cricket is that it's the Britishness at its most ridiculous. First, I'm stupid, can you? I don't. Once I was sitting in Oxford and observed the game for 5 hours, I didn't understand anything. I simply couldn't connect the points. It's one guy there with a strange feminized gesture throws a ball. Some other guys start to run there. I never got the connection, you know. Somebody explained it to me that the only people who really understand cricket are from late 30s, 1930s, you know, when KGB ran Oxford. You have to be gay and the KGB agent, you know. That is the only way. But you know what?
It was Cambridge, not Oxford.
Yeah. No, what I want to say is that I like this. This is for me how a totally ridiculous, ambiguous game. And correct me if I was wrong. Somebody told me that a ridiculous way of throwing the ball came from the fact that originally it was women's game, and that men had to imitate a certain... What I would like to hear, do you have it, British? Well, I love these stories of origins. You know how the origin of gold. 2 Scottish shepherds walking with sticks, one of them by mistake kicks a stone, falls into a hole, and we invented golf or whatever, you know. I would like to hear the origins of cricket in this.
But in terms of cricket, I mean, when you say that it is very characteristic of the British attitude, or a conception of people about British attitude, is that this is one of the very few games, I suppose baseball is similar to that,
baseball
where you have always one person confronting a whole team, 11. So there is the batsman, it's just him, in total existential solitude, and 11 guys around him trying to kill him. So that is, you know, very much the British individualist attitude.
Yeah, but is the one always alone, or does everyone occupy that place within?
Eventually everyone, but at every one point in time, diachronically, not synchronically. Synchronically you are right, but diachronically it is 1 against 11. Now that is quite unique. In most games you have, you know, the same number of players on both sides, 1 against 1 or 11 against 11. Here you have 1.
But it's still 11. Better than that pseudo-gay obscenity of baseball when one guy is down and then 20 guys jump on him. And I don't want even to imagine what is happening.
Okay, let's get the last round.
That's not British what they are doing.
Last round, please. Andrew's there, I think the gentleman there, and the gentleman at the back.
Are you implying that Andrew is not a gentleman, or what?
No, gangster.
Andrew,
gangster.
Well, my question is also about this idea that spirit is the wound of nature. And, you know, I was really struck by the passage from Aaron Schuster that you read, because it sounded so Schopenhauerian, this idea that optimism is the last refuge of pessimism in a certain way. And then, of course, that made me think that you know, Parsifal is also very Schopenhauerian at that point for Wagner. So there is this kind of subtext there, and it's really the revolutionary Wagner of 1848, I think, whom you would more look to as a thinker here, and as a, you know, for political inspiration. And with Schopenhauer, we get an ethics of compassion as sort of the ultimate upshot of this separation from nature. And whereas, you know, I take it you want to advocate a politics of solidarity as opposed to that ethics of separation. So I'm wondering if there's some way in which we can think about an ecology that would be based on a concept of solidarity rather than compassion, where the task would be, as it were, to look for the point of the universal struggle in nature.
Okay.
So the liberal and postmodern critique of Hegel and Marxism somehow is that it's a closed system, and the totality means totalitarianism, and that therefore Hegel and Marx are Stalin, and Stalin is Hegel, and so on. And the solution then is that everything is relative. We need gradual contextuality, and it ends up in a kind of very fragmented way of thinking, in political reformism on the political level and so on. And my question is then, for resisting this, wouldn't it be the best thing to reload Hegel in such a way that the way we are doing philosophy is precisely like Hegel's logic, very systematic totality, where you have Seinslogik, Wesenslogik, and Begriffslogik, and each of the 3 logics again decomposes into 3 logics, and so on, that you have a constant dialectical movement of the categories. Would this be the best way to do it? But now if I look at your talk that you were just giving. You're starting with a joke, then it's about deadlocks and redoubling of impossibilities, negation, then you go to history, Heidegger, nature, Gegenstoß, identity, India, colonialism, universalism.
I got the point, yeah.
Eggs and omelets, but isn't this precisely this way of you are doing philosophy, the way you're presenting, the way you're writing books, isn't it precisely a postmodern chaos of categories, references, stories, jokes that are not connected in such a dialectical, logical way at the level of the logic of form of philosophy, the way we are doing philosophy. So why do you preach a return and a reloading of Hegel, but at your own level of form of philosophy, it's completely postmodern and non-Hegelian, so isn't Zizek then in the end, at the level of the form of philosophy, a postmodernist and a non-Hegelian? So it's a little bit like, Zizek is a little bit, or your philosophy is a little bit like cooking the eggs and to find some ingredients somewhere and
okay, but
he's accusing you of performative contradiction. Okay, yes, what is the point? Good.
It's a dialectical omelette.
Yeah, okay. And then last one. Okay, you both very short, please, so we can finish.
Yes,
first the gentleman because we. No, come on. We'll start
very quickly. Your construal of the Hegelian paradigm seems to be still committed to a kind of triangulation. You're just shifting the starting point instead of the positive and the immediate determination. You're actually starting with the negative. And then you end up with authentic universality as your third term. Is that what you really want? Because in the latest book, you're willing there to suggest even a fourth term and a fifth term. Is in the dialectic. There can be at least a fourth term.
As Hegel
says. And then maybe even a fifth term. So are you committing yourself to a triangulation still, my question?
Okay, and the final one.
This is a question about your materialist reversal of Marx. You make 2 points over there which sort of tend in slightly different directions. One is that Marx, in a sense, misses the point of Hegel and conceives of alienation as a shell that can just be cast off. And the other is that Marx is actually more Hegelian than Hegel at certain moments. Now, I was wondering in this light, how would you consider the early Marxist critique of Hegel? Because isn't this precisely one of these moments when paradoxically he is being more Hegelian than Hegel? He's accusing Hegel, rightly or wrongly, quite possibly wrongly, as you say, of confusing the contradictions of the idea with the contradictions in reality, in the thing itself.
Which, as I hope you know, is very interesting point deployed by Manfred Frank in his first book, which is the only good book he wrote on Schelling, Unendliche Mangel and Sein. Do you know that all, but all means all, early Marxist critique of Hegel is already found in late Schelling, inclusive of this apparently very materialist Marxist point that Hegel displaces actual antagonisms into merely conceptual contradictions. Please finish.
I actually got that from your work, not from Manfred.
Okay,
the terms in which Marx is critical of Hegel are, in a sense, also very reminiscent of the terms in which you're critical of Marx, right? I mean that Marx is, when you say that Marx misses the whole point of alienation, that he sees for something that can just be cast aside, so he's missing the contradictions and the tensions within the thing which are constitutive of the thing. So, so I've just got, won't go on.
Maybe, I will try to be as short as possible.
Perform the contradiction over there.
Yeah, no, I will leave that to the end maybe, because first, this early Hegel, again, these are excellent questions, one needs time, so very briefly. My general attitude is nonetheless that for me, the early Marx critique of Hegel, so-called philosophico-economic manuscript, German ideology, and so on, is the worst you can imagine. This is Feuerbachian. Even Robert Pippin is right in suggesting that there is, when Marx speaks about positive, essential Wesenskräfte powers, that this is basically a step back from subjectivity to some kind of substantial positive forces and so on. I think all these reversals that young Marx has, like instead of subject being master of the object, dominates. I think that only after the failure of Revolution of 48, when returning to read Hegel, only at that point Marx effectively got some type of understanding of Hegel. As to triangulation, well, I would say, even if I speak about four or whatever, no, I'm always suspicious of this moment of opening in the sense of we need more. For example, I never got this critique, this fear of binary logic. I think that I'm precisely, if by binary logic you mean a basic opposition, structuring antagonism, I'm totally for it. And as a Hegelian, I claim precisely when you have an apparent plurality, oh, it's not just two, it's this, you should always look for the oppressed one, which you like. If you have A, B, C, D, and so on, you should say A versus and then one of the others which condenses all the others and so on. It's interesting how people usually evoke sexuality here. It's like the binary gender difference versus, I don't know, some of these deconstructionist sexologists claim, oh, the great mistake of Freud was to claim there are only two sexes. There are not only two sexes. There are 20, 30, 40 sexes or whatever. I mean, but again, in a raw analogy with politics, it's the same as saying, and this sounds then much more revisionist, like there are not only two classes, class struggle, no, there are 30, 40 classes, and so on. I believe in fundamental antagonism. The theoretical point, not time to develop it now here, is why to have an antagonism, you need at least three. That is to say, you have to have a couple and an excessive element which, as it were, embodies the deadlock of this couple. This is the authentic complication, which is why one line I wanted to pursue is developed by our good friend from Ljubljana, who couldn't come here, unfortunately, Mladen Dolar. He takes, you remember that, one of the most famous quotes from Kierkegaard, that Kierkegaard quotes Danish humorist, whatever, who says that all of humanity can be subdivided into all people, all human persons, into officers, housemates, and chimney sweepers. Now, it sounds crazy, but you can immediately find a logic in it. It's officers, male principal, housewives, feminine, and chimney sweeper, the intrusive third element, and so on. So it's not quite and in this sense, the couple, fundamental antagonism, has to appear like three. You have two classes and then at least a rebel or whatever. But, okay, so in this sense, I am for triangulation. And if anything, I would be tempted to say that it's not even three, it's the repetition. That's why I like Kierkegaard. When Kierkegaard speaks about aesthetic, ethical, religious, it's not really three, it's two. You have the opposition of ethics and aesthetics, and the moment ethical wins, aesthetical returns as religious. In other words, you never get synchronously the three. You get two, and then at another level, the two. What you said about that question about Schopenhauer, Parsifal, and so on, I'm sorry, again, a mega question, don't have time to answer it properly. I hope you know the story of Parsifal. My dream is to restage Parsifal in a disgustingly, if you know the story, New Age, Dan Brown style, where in Act 2, where Kundry tries to seduce Parsifal, Parsifal says no, and the castle of Klingsor disappears, then Parsifal in Act 3. What if at the end of Act 2, Parsifal is seduced by Kundry, they, to put it bluntly, fuck like crazy, and then in Act 3, Parsifal returns with Kundry to Montsalvat the castle and gives some kind of a Dan Brown Da Vinci Code message. We put too much accent on the male principle. We need yin-yang. Kundry will rule with me, and so on. The point is not to celebrate it, but to find it the most, the worst possible. I think that Zimmerberg was on the right track when he made, it was a stroke of a genius in his cinema version of Parsifal, that at the moment of rejecting Kundry's advances, Parsifal, young boy, turns into a young woman. That we don't need an external intervention of femininity. At the very moment of rejecting women's advances, Parsifal himself turns, and so on and so on. What about that Schopenhauerian, what does it mean, solidarity against compassion? I agree. Let me give you just one example that I like. The movie should be burned publicly, I hate it. Terence Malick's The Tree of Life. But there is one wonderful line of dialogue towards the end, when Brad Pitt, the father, tells the son, like apologizing, like, sorry, I was a bad father, and so on. And I think that the son there, it's not yet played by Sean Penn, but the young guy, provides a perfect answer to what it means in authentic Freud, the resolution of Oedipal complex. He said, don't worry, father, we are solidary because I'm as bad as you, I'm even worse as you. You know, that Oedipal resolution is not you drop the father, you adopt the idealist father. But you, of course, every puberty adolescent guy knows his father is evil, bad. But then, you know, I can beat him, I can be even more evil than my father. And that would be my notion of solidarity, you know. Not, oh, ecological, we are good, and so on. We are, that we humans are the meanest animal that can be. We are animal, which is why I like, you know, there are wonderful books that I cannot advise to you but to buy them. There is a short book called Politically Correct Version of the Bible, where you have, maybe you know it, paraphrase of, you know, this best known, one of the biggest hits of the Bible, you know. Although I walk in the valley of tears. No, or shadow, whatever, tears. Yes, tears, I fear no evil, and so on. Now, what is this and so on? First, you have the Judith Butler version. I like it. Against this, making fun of this binary logic. No, although I walk in the valley of tears, I fear no evil, because I know that good and evil are just metaphysical binary opposites. No, this is Judith Butler. But then Tom Mitchell told me a wonderful black version from Chicago ghetto. Although I walk in the valley of tears, I fear no evil, because I'm the meanest motherfucker in the entire valley. You know, like, this would be my solidarity with them. I am the meanest one here. And yes, the Stalinism totality, you know, not to lose time, but I'm quite serious in what we'll say. Are you aware that the way you described me, jumping here and there, not mentioning obscene jokes, is the way phenomenology of spirit was critically described when it appeared? That this is the standard complaint. Whatever stupid book is this? French Revolution, this, that, perception, and so on. So I wouldn't buy so much the idea, isn't all this systematic aspect of Hegel more secondary Bearbeitung, as they would say, secondary Bearbeitung of a much, in other words, I claim that Hegel is not simply this system, sorry? No. It means that logic is a much more crazy book than it may appear. That it's really a series of failures, you know, like, we try this, it fails, let's try something else. Which is why also, as you probably know, and I did study it, if you go, no, here I must disappoint you. If I were to choose at a gunpoint, you know, like, this is the only serious problem for rational Christian people, which is the greatest book of all times, Phenomenology or Logic, no? At the gunpoint, I would, I don't mention some capital or bullshit like that. No, at the gunpoint, I would have chosen logic, nonetheless. And it's so clear how often Hegel cheats and improvises there. We can get a hint of this, of the changes that he envisaged, I think, if you compare the different versions, no, encyclopedia, great logic, encyclopedia, then a very interesting version of logic. My God, Hegel, this is for me the craziest moment of Hegel. You remember that when he was a professor at a high school, he gave a high school course for pure, what did they get from it? You know, and treating logic exactly the way you describe it, you know, as some kind of a code system to be explained to young men of 15, 16, being nothing, becoming, or whatever. No, I think that you know, this idea of especially late Hegel is this. That's the usual idea. This young Hegel and still phenomenology is still a living thought, while the late Hegel is some kind of a dead systematizer. If anything, and some French guys, I forgot their name, emphasize this, I think the time is to stop, the same as with Marx, this celebration of lively existential young Hegel, and to start to say Berlin Hegel is our Hegel.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, lots of people have asked me about this business that was published recently in the Observer newspaper, that the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, has commissioned 4 operas on your work. Can you explain to us what is happening? Is it Parsifal going to be one of those?
No, it's nothing.
No.
It's nothing. It is just that I like Caspar Holten, because he did...
The director of Covent Garden.
And he's a snob like me, you know, a radical leftist. And then I asked him, what was the most pleasant moment when you staged The Ring? He told me, when the Queen of Denmark visited me. And all true leftists are like this, you know. But seriously, no.
So what is the story?
The story is just this. He got some money and wants to spend it on new operas, and it's pure... He just wants my name to add some intellectual charisma to him. It means he made it pretty clear, and that's what I like, that nothing serious he wants from me, nothing.
What about the Antigone? I thought we were going to do the Antigone together.
That's what I tried to bribe him with, but he basically said, fuck off, no? No, he said a very interesting idea, but you know, like, okay, not now, you know, forget about it. So I'm still looking for someone to do my triple Antigone, or to do these new versions of Parsifal, because, you know, Alain Badiou, his dream is to stage... Alain Badiou has 2 dreams now. One is, as we all know, to do a film on Plato. But you know what kind of film? First, I thought some shitty Godard style, you know. No. Big Hollywood production. Brad Pitt should be young Plato. Young Aristotle, who is bad guy, should be played by Tom Cruise, but the one from Magnolia, you know, the disgusting character. Penelope Cruz should be Plato's wife. And Badiou himself should be the old Parmenides, the teacher, the great one. And first I thought he is joking. And then it took me half an hour to get it, that he means absolutely seriously. I learned he already contacted friends in Hollywood if they can. So this is one. His second dream, more serious, is to stage a communist version of Parsifal. The idea is when Parsifal said, and Hülden Graal disclosed the Grail, it's a red flag, which is like this. No? That would be maybe my true dream, no?
Okay, thank you. We're going to see it happen.
But if you want to get a good Caspar Holten, you can get it now on DVD, I think. It's not entirely a success, but it works. A shortened version of Don Giovanni set in today's London. It works. It's interesting. I'm not saying it's a great thing, but it's like, what I like is that it's this contemporary Don Giovanni when Don Giovanni seduces Zerlina. My God, you see him and her naked, you know, like, it's the thing itself, not fat opera singers singing and so on, no?
Okay, thank you very much. Great.
Thank you. Okay, you survived. You know,